Hello, my friend. Today, I will tell you another long-forgotten legend. Close your eyes and let the magic transport you to Middle-earth. Our journey begins in the deep elder twilight of Arda. Before the world took the shape that elves and men would come to know, before even the stars had sung their silver songs across the heavens, there was harmony. There was a great music, Theolind, shaped by the thought of Au Iluvatar, the One. From this music came the Auror, immortal spirits vast and powerful, each a note in the sacred theme that would birth the world. Among them one shone brighter than the rest. Melor he was named, mightiest of the Aor, gifted with a mind as vast as the sky, and a fire as fierce as the heart of a star. He listened deeply to the music, and within him stirred a desire not only to sing with it, but to shape it, to bend it to his own design. For a time he wandered the halls of the void, seeking the flame imperishable, the secret fire of creation. Yet it was not for him to wield, for it belonged to Iluvatar alone. And so a seed of disquoking not for beauty's sake, but for dominion. When Eru brought forth the world, Arda Melor entered it with the others. But even then his thoughts were at odds with their harmony. He desired power over the lands that were not yet formed, over the seas that had not yet rolled, and over the beings who had not yet woken. Where the Valar, his brethren, sought to build and bring forth life, Melor sought to dominate and unmake. Thus began the first discord. In the long darkness of the early days, Melor's pride grew. He cast shadows upon the light of the two lamps, Iluin and Ormal, and with their fall, the world was plunged into ruin. Mountains cracked, seas boiled, and the lands were broken. The Valar withdrew into Aman in the far west, building Valinor, a land untouched by shadow, to guard the light they still held dear. But Melor, now called Morgoth, black foe of the world, retreated into the north, into the fortress of Angband. There he gathered around him a host of terrible servants, Balrogs cloaked in fire and despair, dragons of flame and venom, and orcs mockeries of the children of Au, twisted by Morgoth's hatred. He forged iron crowns, filled dungeons with despair, and from the depths of his malice came the long night of the world. And yet in the heart of Aman, the light of the two trees still grew. Lori Lelyn and Telperion, golden and silver, lit the blessed realm with a beauty that sang even in silence. From this light, Feanor, greatest of the New Lore elves, forged the Silmarils, three jewels of such radiant wonder that even the Valar were awed. But Morgoth, desiring their beauty for himself, saw in them a way to break the peace of Valinor. In the darkness of treachery, Morgoth struck. He slew Finwë, the High King of the New Lore, and stole the Silmarils. Fleeing across the ice of the Hellerocs, he returned to Angband and set the jewels in his iron crown, mocking all that was holy. So began the first age of Arda and the long wars that stained the land with sorrow. Yet the Valar did not march in vengeance. They remained in the west, sorrowing for the strife that now gripped Middle-earth. It was not until the end of the First Age, when the cry of elves and men alike pierced the silence of the west, that they stirred again, for the ruin wrought by Morgoth had grown too great. The lands themselves cried out, the sea trembled with mourning, and the very stars above seemed to dim beneath his shadow. It was then that Enwë, the herald of Manwë, king of the Valar, was sent forth. He stood tall and radiant, bearing the standard of the West, and his voice rang like silver across the sea. With him came the host of Valinor, mayor in gleaming mail, elves of Ammon, whose eyes shone with the light of the trees, and beings older than time, shaped for war and justice. Across the sea they sailed, a fleet of white ships moving like silent stars upon the waves. They landed upon the broken shores of Beleriand, where Morgoth's terror still reigned. There, upon the fields of the north, the last and greatest war of the Elder Days began. The War of Wrath. The earth groaned beneath the clash of forces. Mountains were rent, rivers turned to fire, and the skies wept blood and flame. The dragons of Morgoth, led by Encalagon the Black, darkened the heavens like a second night. But the eagles of Manwë rose against them, and in their midst Arundel the Mariner, mortal and immortal both, soared in his ship Vingulot, bearing the light of a Silmaril upon his brow. He slew Encalagon, and the beast's fall shattered the peaks of Thangorodrim. One by one, Morgoth's armies fell. The Balrogs were broken, scattered into the deep places of the earth. The orcs fled like leaves before the storm, and in the end, Morgoth stood alone within the deepest vaults of Angband. His iron crown cracked, his might a shadow of what it had once been. There Yane found him. He came not in wrath, but in sorrow, for even the mightiest could fall into ruin. Morgoth, once greatest of the Aor, was cast down, chained with Angor, the binding wrought by the Valor themselves. Bound hand and foot, he was brought before the judgment of the West. And so began the long march westward, a procession not of triumph, but of reckoning. The sea parted for the host of Valinor, and the sky held its breath. Behind them, Valyrian, broken by war, sank into the sea, lost to time and memory. Morgoth would be judged. But the end was not yet written, and the stars above, ever watching, whispered to one another of what was to come. The sea stretched before them, wide and mournful, its dark mirror catching the silent sails of the westward fleet, as if reluctant to let them pass. Even the winds, which once bore the sweet scent of Ammon's gardens and the clean breath of open skies, had become hesitant, whispering soft laments through the rigging like an old friend uncertain of farewell. The host of Valinor moved with the weight of inevitability, their ships white as bone, their banners veiled in starlight. There was no singing aboard these vessels, no triumph in the eyes of those who came to right the most ancient of wrongs, only a deep, abiding silence, the kind that settles on the soul when one marches not to glory, but to judgment. Onwë stood at the prow of the foremost ship, his silver mail catching the pale gleam of moonlight that trickled through the thickening clouds above. His eyes, ancient as the first dawn over Arda, gazed ahead toward the unseen horizon. Yet his thoughts wandered far behind. His helm, crowned with the sign of Manwë's house, had not dulled with age, yet the weight upon his brow felt heavier with each passing league. He was the voice of the Valor, the hand of mercy and doom alike. And now he carried the burden of a sentence long deferred, the reckoning of one who had once been counted as kin. He turned slowly, his voice low, steady, yet laced with a sorrow that wrapped itself around every word like ivy grown on stone. "He was one of us," he murmured to the still air, though no one had spoken. "Do you remember what he was before the world was shaped? Before he fell into his own shadow, his words fell like stones into the deep well of silence. Melor, the flame that outshines stars. He could have brought beauty to every corner of creation had he only learned to listen, to yield not to weakness, but to wonder. Behind him the Maiar stood in contemplative stillness, their forms like statues cut from light. Yet it was one among them, younger in spirit but wise in heart, who finally answered. Her name was Ilmeriel, and her voice, when it came, carried the hush of midnight forests and the soft ache of first grief. He listened once, she said, but not to the music, only to the echo of his own voice. He mistook its reflection for the will of Eru, and in that mirror he lost his way. She stepped forward, her eyes reflecting the starlight above and the sorrow below. Do you believe he ever truly understood what he became? Or was he simply too far gone to remember who he had been? Unwa closed his eyes, and the waves beneath their vessels seemed to still as if Arda itself held its breath. Perhaps he understood, he said at last. And that is the cruelest truth of all, that he did not fall blindly, but walked willingly into the dark, knowing full well the light he abandoned. And as if to mirror that thought, the horizon darkened further, thick clouds gathering as they neared the edges of the world. No sun shone there, and even the stars began to blur, their light strangled by the gloom of distant lands scarred by war. The sea beneath them became a slate of shadow and cold. And in the far distance, like a wound in the body of the earth, lay the scorched and ruined remnants of Boleriand, where Morgoth's shadow had taken root and festered. The host made landfall upon a shore so blackened by fire and ancient malice that even the stone seemed to groan beneath their feet. Ash fell like silent snow, coating the armor of the elves with a fine gray dust that clung not only to steel, but to spirit. The wind was bitter, howling through the broken trees like a mourning mother whose children had long since vanished. The sky above yawned wide and empty, as if some celestial hand had torn away its heart and left only the shell behind. The elves who walked with the Enway had once basked beneath the light of the two trees, and yet even their radiance seemed dimmed by the land's desolation. One of them, Kalon, a lord of Tirion, with eyes the color of starlit seas, knelt upon the black sand and placed his hand upon it as one might touch a dying friend's brow. "There is no song left in this earth," he whispered, his voice hollow, his breath clouding before him like fading memory. "It has been strangled, choked on iron and grief." He turned his face too, though his bearing remained proud, his eyes shimmered with anguish. "How can we unmake such sorrow? How do you undo a wound that is soaked into the bones of the world?" Only said nothing, for there was no comfort to offer. But the silence between them was not empty. It was a space left for mourning, a reverent hush before the reckoning to come. In the heart of the land, buried deep beneath the crags and scorched stone, Angband still festered. Though its towers had fallen and its gates had been broken by flame and storm, something lingered. The fortress was not dead. It was dreaming. And at its core, Morgoth lay bound, not yet exiled, but sealed within the chains of Angor, which no hand but the Valars could undo. His spirit, once a beacon of splendor, now pulsed with a sickly glow, flickering like a torch caught in the breath of death. He lay still, but not insensate. When the host reached him, they found him not as he had once been. Not the dark king, clad in black armor, waved in flame, but a being shrunken by his own malice, a shadow of a shadow, cloaked in broken pride. His once mighty frame lay curled upon a dais of obsidian, and around him the darkness thickened, not of the world, but of his own making. Yanwe stepped forward, his hand upon the hilt of a blade that was never drawn. The chamber pulsed faintly, reacting to his presence. And Morgoth stirred. His eyes, though dim, opened. They did not flare. They did not blaze. They bled, not with tears, but with the weight of his own unraveling. And then, in a voice like old stone breaking beneath the weight of a mountain, Morgoth spoke. "So they have come at last." His tone was not defiant, nor yet repentant. It was a tone soaked in weariness, in the realization of a tale long written and now ending. "I see you, Herald of the West," he said, voice rasping as dust caught on wind. "And I hear your silence louder than the thunders of Tanichel. You have come to bring me away, to cast me out beyond the stars, to forget me." Beyond did not yet reply, and so Morgoth continued, each word a shiver in the bones of the world. "Do you think it is mercy, this exile? Do you believe that the void will change me? I, who named the darkness my kingdom, who shaped the world in shadow. There is no forgetting, not for me, not for you. I am the memory of the music gone awry." There was a pause. Yanwe stepped forward until the torchlight touched his face, and he looked into the hollow gaze of what had once been the brightest flame. "You are the discord that sought to silence the harmony," he said, his voice low, sorrowful, and unshaking. "But the music continues, Morgoth, even now, and your note has ended, and the winds of the ruined land howl through broken stone, as if echoing the final cadence of that declaration." The silence that followed Yennewe's words was not hollow, but pregnant with the weight of ancient judgment and sorrowful finality. It stretched out across the dim chamber like a vast tapestry unfurling, its threads woven from the echoes of battles GDK past and the shattered hopes of 1,000 years around them. The hall of Angband groaned like a beast in its death throes, stone grinding against stone, as if the fortress itself, wrought of hate and iron, felt the agony of its master. And in that torment was remembering what it had once been, GDK by the mind that now lay bound in its heart. The air was thick, choked not merely with ash or the scent of old fire, but with the residue of something deeper, an ancient spiritual fatigue, as though the very breath of the world had been held too long and was now exhaling in a slow, mournful sigh. The torches, which should have burned with clear flame in the presence of so many holy ones, flickered GDK light, their glow sliding across Morgoth's withered form, as if reluctant GDK, as if light itself hesitated to touch what had once been Melor the Radiant, the most beloved of the Awe. Morgoth lifted his gaze slowly to meet Yanwe's, and in his eyes, diminished though they were, there lingered a strange and terrible clarity, like the still surface of a lake beneath which a leviathan stirs. His voice, when it came again, was quieter, yet somehow more potent, like the hush before a landslide, or the moment a tower begins to tilt in its fall. And yet he said, "The music continues. Yes, you are right. It flows still, and I am its dissonant echo. The note that does not blend, but juts out like a broken tooth in a mouth once fair." He shifted in the chains that bound him, chains wrought by the valor themselves, forged in the fires beneath the mountains of Ian, with spells spoken in the first tongue of the world, groaned with a sound not unlike mourning. "But tell me, Herald of the West, does your pity not stir even now? You see what I have become, a thing worn and emptied, a cup cracked and drained of all fire. Do you not wonder if in the unnumbered years I have lain here, I have come to understand that perhaps, in the silence of my undoing, I have touched the edge of repentance?" And his words slithered through the chamber like smoke, not poisonous, but burdened with a tragic eloquence. And even the elves who stood in their shining mail shifted uneasily, as if a forgotten sadness had been awoken within them. A faint memory of Valinor before the Sundering, of a time when Melor had not yet been the enemy, but merely one of the brethren, curious and bright, his laughter golden, his gaze filled with dreams of creation. Yonwi did not speak immediately. He stood tall, unmoving, but his eyes did not harden. They deepened, darkened, as if reflecting the starlit firmament of a world before corruption. When he did speak, his voice was softer than before, and its gentleness made it all the more powerful. "I have wondered, yes," he admitted, and the admission fell like a feather into the stillness, light yet piercing. "I have wondered whether you felt sorrow, not for the pain you caused, but for the heights you once touched and then abandoned. I have wondered whether you grieve the beauty you destroyed, not out of remorse, but out of envy that it did not yield Yude will. I have wondered if you, Melor, ever loved anything more than the echo of your own desires." He stepped closer, and the light that surrounded him intensified, casting long, rippling stepgay in the walls of the hall. "But no answer that grants you redemption. For you did not fall as a child who stumbles, nor even as a warrior brought low by rage. You fell with eyes wide open. You chose your path not once, but countless times, each time deeper, each time darker, until you could no longer hear the music at all. Outside the broken mountains groaned as if they too remembered, as if the roots of the world itself mourned for the part of it that had been twisted out of true. A wind rose from the west, threading its way through shattered stone and chasms still smoking from ancient fire. It carried with it the scent of the sea, a scent that had not touched these lands in ages, and with it came the faintest murmur of waves against distant shores, a reminder of a man and the unchanging light that still dwelt there. Unmarred, eternal, Morgoth's head bowed, and for a moment his voice was like the whisper of leaves falling in a forest where no living soul remains. "Then you will not see me as I am now," he said. "You will see only the shadow of what I became, and never the brilliance of what I once was. So be it. Cast me out, banish me into the void. Let me drift beyond the reach of stars and song, into the hollow darkness where not even memory can follow." His words carried not bitterness, but a dreadful resignation, as if he spoke of a doom long foretold and now merely fulfilled. "But know this," he added, and now his voice grew again, not in power, but in depth, a tremor that stirred something ancient and weary in the marrow of the stones themselves. "You cannot erase me. I am written into the fabric of this world, a thread that runs beneath every note of your precious music. Even the brightest light casts a shadow. Even the most beautiful harmony is shaped by contrast. You will throw me into the dark, yes, but my echo will linger, and one day it will find voice again." The elf stirred uneasy, for there was truth in his words, as there often had been in his lies. And truth, when spoken from such a place of ruin, bore the sting of prophecy. But Yanwi was unmoved. His voice remained calm, yet now it rang with the certainty of judgment, rendered not in anger, but in solemn clarity. You speak of shadow, and it is true. The music has discord within it, just as the sea bears storm and the sky thunder. But it does not begin with you, and it does not end with you. You were a part of the song, Melor, but you are not its author, and your echo, should it rise again, will never be more than that, a ghost note fading. He lifted his hand, and the chains of Anganor stirred, glowing faintly with a silver light that pulsed in rhythm with the stars above. The air grew still, and the breath of the world seemed to pause, as if all of Arda, its peaks and valleys, its winds and waters, waited to exhale. "For the crimes of your choosing," Eoni declared, his voice resounding now with the authority of the West. "For the sorrow you have sown, for the beauty you have defiled, for the will of Au that you defied with full knowing, you are cast from the circles of the world. You will pass through the door of night into the void beyond time, where no star may reach and no sound may. There you shall remain until the end of days, when all is gathered and made whole again." And as he spoke those last words, the torches flared with one final breath of fire, and then dimmed, not in dread, but in reverence, as though the chamber itself recognized that the hour of reckoning had come, and with it the first breath of a new silence. As the final syllables of Ane's judgment faded into the hushed breath of the ruined hall, a strange stillness fell. Not the silence of peace, but the waited pause before a great storm is loosed upon the world, or the quiet found in the deepest part of night, when even the stars seem reluctant to speak. The chains of Angonor, ancient and inscribable, stirred like sleeping serpents, roused by the wind of fate. Their silver links shimmered faintly with an inner light that was not warm, but solemn, as though they too bore the sadness of what they were made to do. They glowed like moonlight glimpsed through the bars of a prison cell, beautiful, distant, and unyielding. The ground trembled so softly at first that only the most attuned felt it, like the breath of some old and forgotten beast stirring in its sleep beneath the bones of the world. Dust fell from the shattered ceiling in gentle spirals, catching the last dim glow of the torches and dancing for a moment in the air before vanishing into the blackness below. The stones themselves groaned, not from strain, but from memory, as if the very walls of Angband remembered all that had come before. The forges, the cries of the tormented, the endless echoing footsteps of fear. And now at last they remembered the ending, and in remembering they wept without sound. Morgoth remained still. His form, diminished as it was, did not quake, nor did he beg or rail or scream as many might have imagined he would. Instead, he raised his head with slow dignity and looked out over those gathered before him. And for a brief instant, it seemed as though the being who had once shone brightest among the Auror had returned, not in power, but in presence, not as a king, but as a shadow that refused to be forgotten. "I wonder," he said softly, his voice a whisper that echoed through the broken chamber like the rustle of dry leaves caught in a winter wind. "If you understand what you do, He did not speak to alone, but to all who stood there, elves and Maiar alike, as though seeking to touch the heart of each with words more potent than weapons. "You cast me into the void," he continued, as though it were a tomb, "a final silence into which my voice shall never rise again. And yet I ask, what is the void but unshaped potential, the absence that gives form to being? You say I am a shadow, and you are not wrong. But tell me, Herald of the West, tell me truly, can a shadow exist without the light that casts it? You believe you sever me from the world? But what if the world cannot forget me because it was shaped not merely in spite of me, but also because of me?" His gaze swept the hall, and the air grew colder, not from malice, not from fear, but from the strange, aching truth of his words. For they carried not fire now, but the chill of reflection, the icy understanding that even ruin leaves behind a contour, and even evil once born forever bends the path of those who oppose it. "There are those," he said, his voice deepening like a river passing beneath ancient roots, "who will speak my name not with reverence, but with curiosity, who will read the ruins of Angband and see not just the cruelty, but the challenge, who will wonder what kind of power it was that dared to oppose the valor and dared to lose, and in losing left the scars that taught the world to fear. I shall be remembered, perhaps not as I was, but as a question, a warning, a possibility." Amway's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with the sorrow that only comes to those who see a soul so deeply fragmented that it no longer knows what it once sought. "You mistake remembrance for relevance," he said, his voice as quiet and firm as the fall of snow upon an empty field. "You speak of potential, of the power of the void to echo your name. But you forget, Melor, that the void does not shape, it absorbs. It does not sing, it swallows. You will not be remembered as a challenge, but as a grief, a silence that reminds the world what it must never again become." And even as he spoke, the light of the Valar, the light of Aman itself, woven into the being of the Maiar who stood in that place, began to shimmer more brightly, spilling like water across the stone, banishing the clinging shadows of Angband, as though the sun were rising in the very bones of the world. The hall was no longer a prison, but a stage for the last act of an ancient tragedy, and the stones, though scarred, gleamed faintly with the dignity of something long suffering, now finding its rest. Then came the moment of parting, the door of night, long sealed in the deeps of the world, beyond the edge of mortal understanding, opened like a wound in the sky. None among the children of Iluvatar ever saw it save in dream and dread, but those who stood in that hall felt its breath pass over them. A great hollow stillness, not cold like winter, but empty like a starless firmament that has never known light. It was not a gate, but a chasm, a great yawn in the fabric of Arda, into which all fallen things were hurled, and from which none returned. And from that unseen gulf there came no sound, no beckoning whisper, only the vast and aching hush of eternity, unshaped. The chains stirred. They lifted Morgoth from the stone like marionette threads, not cruelly, but with a terrible grace, as though the world itself had taken him gently by the shoulders and begun to carry him toward the threshold of unbeing. He did not resist. His eyes, dark and old and full of broken stars, looked once more upon the world he had tried to claim, and in them there flickered, Not rage, nor madness, nor triumph, but something more terrible still. Recognize, I was the first to fall, he whispered as the shadows closed around him. And perhaps in the end, I shall be the last. And then he was gone, not vanished in a burst of light or consumed by fire, but simply gone, as though the air had taken him back, or the memory of him had slipped from the world like a dream upon waking. The hall remained, but it was no longer Angband, fortress of dread and ruin. It was only stone, and silence, and dust. And outside the sky had cleared. The wind blew across the plains of the north, free for the first time in ages, and the stars, those silent witnesses to the long grief of Arda, shone a little brighter, as though in quiet vigil for what had passed, and for what still might come. The night that followed Morgoth's banishment was unlike any other night that had come before it, or any that would follow. For it was not merely the turning of the stars across the dome of the sky, nor the hush that falls over a land at rest. It was the deep, resonant quiet of a world exhaling after holding its breath for an age. The winds that crept across the broken lands no longer bore the weight of dread, nor the scent of blood and iron. They carried instead something strange and new, something almost forgotten, possibility, as if the very air, long poisoned by the presence of an ancient malice, had remembered how to breathe freely once again. Yanwe stood upon the ruined ramparts of Angband, his silver mantle flowing behind him like the remnants of a forgotten starlight. The echoes of Morgoth's final words still lingered in the stone beneath his feet, not as sound, but as a weight like frost that does not melt even in sunlight. There around him the land stretched into darkness, a scorched plain carved by rivers of old fire and shattered by the tread of armies long dissolved. The very bones of the earth had been fractured by the grinding passage of hate. And now that its master was gone, it did not rejoice. It simply was silent, scarred, enduring. And Yanwe, once the voice of glory and song in the courts of Valinor, felt not triumph in his heart, but a hollow ache, as though he had sung a lament so long and so loud that his throat had forgotten the sound of joy. He bowed his head, not from shame, but from reverence, from the solemn understanding that even the necessary act of justice is a blade with two edges, one that cuts not only the guilty, but all who hold it. Beside him, Kall, Lord of the Vanir, whose eyes had looked upon the light of the trees and never forgotten it, spoke, his voice quiet, threaded with a sorrow as pale and persistent as winter's sun through frost-laced windows. "It is done," he said, though the words seemed small, unworthy of the moment. "The black foe is cast out, and the world is freed." But I did not answer immediately. He looked out upon the land, and the wind toyed with his hair, brushing against his skin like the lingering fingers of a child who does not yet know they must let go. When he finally spoke, his voice was slow, reflective, every syllable carefully weighed, like stones laid down to form a path across a river of doubt. "Is it," he asked, not as a challenge, but as a mourning, "is the world truly freed? Or have we merely shifted the weight from one shoulder to another and taught the earth to carry its sorrow in silence instead of screams?" Kall turned to him, brow furrowed, and Yanwe continued, his gaze distant. "Morgoth is gone. Yes, but he leaves behind not just ruins and shadows, but echoes, choices, ideas, seeds. He taught the world something it did not know before, that power can be sought for its own sake, that beauty can be broken and bent, that dominion can wear the mask of order, and though he is cast into the void, those who come after will walk through the hollows he left behind and wonder what might grow in such dark and foul ground. He stepped forward, placing his hand upon the scorched stone of the parapet. It was cold, not just with the chill of the wind, but with the long memory of stone that has borne witness to unspeakable things. This fortress did not fall with its master. He said, "It endures, and so too does the wound in the heart of the world. Hidden, perhaps, forgotten even, but it endures." Callan said nothing for a time, but then he spoke with the quiet firmness of one who has walked beneath stars for countless centuries. And yet wounds may heal. Even the land, broken as it is, will one day flower again. Trees will take root where towers once stood. Rivers will sing where fire once howled. Do you not believe? Even now, in the slow kindness of time, Yanhui turned to him, and in his eyes there was not doubt, but depth, a weariness born not of despair, but of understanding. "I believe," he said, "but I also remember. I remember the light before the darkness, and I remember how easily it was dimmed. And I fear not the darkness that lingers, but the forgetfulness of those who come after. The slow erosion of memory, the soft seduction of comfort, until what was once horror becomes history, and what was once warning becomes myth." His voice lowered, and the wind seemed to hush as though the world itself bent to listen. "We are immortal, Callan, but they, the children of Iluvatar, are not, and their memories are shorter than their dreams. One day they will hear of Morgoth and wonder whether he was real or merely the shadow cast by the fear of greater things. And when that day comes, his exile will not be enough to protect them." The sky above was beginning to pale with the approach of dawn, though the sun had not yet risen. The stars shimmered faintly, as if reluctant to give way to the coming light, and the wind carried the distant murmur of waves against the far-off shore, where the host of Valinor had made their landing. It was the sound of water washing against stone, a sound as old as Arda itself, and yet it seemed to carry with it a question, a whisper of something unspoken. What now? Behind them, the warriors of the west had begun to disband, their voices soft as they moved among the ruins, not with the urgency of war, but with the care of mourners gathering after a long and bitter vigil. Some gathered fragments of broken weapons. Others touched the scorched earth with reverent fingers, as though by doing so they might understand the price that had been paid. None sang, none wept. But in their silence was a symphony more powerful than any song, a testament to the truth that even victory, when hard-won, bears the shape of grief. Muani turned once more to the north, where the door of night had vanished into the veil of the sky, leaving no trace, no sign, no scar. And yet he could still feel its presence, as though something vast and hollow lay just beyond the edges of being, watching, waiting, breathing. "You will not return," Callan said more to himself than To. "Not in flesh, not in form." "No," replied, "but in thought, perhaps, in fear, in desire, in ambition unmed from wisdom. He will return not as a being, but as a question whispered in the dark. What if? and that question will echo long after memory fades. And beneath their feet the stone seemed to sigh, not in despair, but in endurance. For the earth too had heard the echo, and it would remember long after all others had forgotten. Dawn rose not with a fanfare of trumpets or the joyous blaze of a clear sky, but with the slow, aching tenderness of a world waking from a long illness, as if the heavens themselves were cautious in their hope, as if even the light feared to fall too quickly upon a land that had known only shadow for so long. The sky, once scorched and bruised by the wars of gods and monsters, softened into hues of weary gold and ashen pink. Like the first breath of warmth upon the cheek of a frost-bitten traveler, and in that gentle light, the ruins of Angband did not vanish, but they changed. Their jagged spires and splintered battlements no longer loomed with menace, but stood like the crumbled bones of something ancient and pitiful, a reminder of what pride, unanchored by love, becomes when stripped of all illusion. The host of Valinor had begun to move again, not with the rigid precision of war, but with the slow deliberation of those who know they carry within their hands not just the tools of rebuilding, but the fragile weight of remembrance. Some turned their steps toward the ships that waited still along the jagged coast, their sails now furled in the windless hush of morning. Others lingered, wandering the broken corridors of what had once been a fortress of dominion and fear, their fingers brushing the scorched walls as if to coax from them the last whispers of a history too vast to ever be written, too sorrowful to be sung. We did not descend immediately. He remained on the high ramp parts, his eyes tracing the horizon where the door of night had opened and closed like a heartbeat in the fabric of the world. The place where Morgoth had been cast out was now indistinguishable from the rest of the sky. No rift, no scar, no mark remained. And yet in that smooth and silent space, he could feel it still, like the lingering pressure in the air after thunder, or the echo of a voice that has stopped speaking but still lives in the memory of sound. The world was not lighter for Morgoth's banishment. It was only different, like a house from which a storm is passed. The walls still stand, but everything inside has shifted. It was there that Ilmariel approached him again, her feet silent upon the broken stone, her presence soft as starlight, yet unyielding, for though she bore no weapon now, her strength was not in iron, but in understanding, and her voice, when she finally spoke, was the kind that made people listen, not because it commanded, but because it revealed. "You have not spoken since the light returned," she said, standing beside him without demand. "Not truly. Not with the voice that carries the soul of the world beneath it. What lingers in you, Eon, that you do not let the dawn in?" And he who had spoken words of judgment with the force of mountains breaking did not answer at once. His eyes were still turned eastward, where the sun, cautious and trembling, crept higher behind veils of mist. When at last he spoke, it was not with the tone of a herald, nor the cadence of command. It was the voice of a soul unraveling itself slowly, thread by thread, trying to make sense of the pattern it had been woven into. "I wonder," he said, "if we truly understand what we have done, not just in casting him out, but in drawing the line finally and fully between what is within the circles of the world and what lies beyond. We speak of justice and we speak of peace, but what we have created is a division, a boundary etched not in stone or sky, but in the spirit of the world itself. And boundaries, Ilmariel, boundaries do not only keep evil out, they also keep memory in. They seal away, and in sealing, they risk forgetting. Marielle's gaze was steady, and the wind caught a strand of her hair, lifting it like a banner that did not need to wave to be seen. "You fear that we will forget him?" she asked, not in disbelief, but with the kind of gentle curiosity that encourages deeper thought. "That we will forget the pain, the ruin?" "No," said, and his voice was heavy now, like roots digging deep into soil long untended. "I fear we will forget what led to it. Not the axe, not the battles, not the ruins. We will remember those, for they are written in song and stone. But I fear we will forget the yearning, the longing that turned to hunger, the brilliance that fell not because it lacked power, but because it mistook will for wisdom. Morgoth fell not because he was weak, but because he was alone. Alone in thought, alone in pride, alone in his desire to reshape the world in the image of his own completion. He turned then slowly and looked at her, not as a captain to a comrade, but as one soul to another, seeking in the reflection of another's eyes the solace of being understood. And I fear we have learned too little that we will teach the children of Luavatar to shun the shadow without understanding it, to silence the question without hearing it first. And if that happens, Ilmariel, if that happens, the shadow will rise again. Not as Morgoth, not as Sauron, but as something new, something unseen. Because we have closed our eyes." For a long time, Ilmariel said nothing. The wind moved between them like a slow river, and below the stones of Angband drank the morning sun like an old tree, absorbing the last warmth of autumn. At length she spoke, and her voice was soft but firm, like the sound of water shaping stone. Perhaps she said, "You are right to fear, but fear alone is not wisdom, just as power alone is not evil. The shadow rises when we forget that the world is not ours to perfect, but ours to steward. When we believe that harmony means silence, when we confuse stillness with peace, we must remember, but not as a warning only. We must remember with compassion, with humility, with the willingness to see even in the enemy the reflection of something once whole." B closed his eyes, and for a moment he felt the ache lessen, not disappear, but soften like a stone warmed by long sunlight after years beneath ice. "I will carry that," he said, "and I will speak it not as law, not as doom, but as song, so that perhaps when the world forgets the war, it may still remember the wound and the healing." And far away, beyond the edges of ruin, a single bird called out across the plains. It was not a song of triumph, it was not even a song of joy, but it was a song, and it was enough. The days that followed unfolded not like pages from a book hastened by a reader's hand, but like the petals of a flower long reluctant to bloom, slow and cautious, unfolding in hesitant stillness beneath a sun it had not seen in countless ages. The land, though wounded, began to stir, not with grandeur, not with songs or golden banners, but with the subtle, almost imperceptible sigh of soil, remembering it could bear life once more. In the cracks of the broken earth, where fire once poured like the veins of wrath, small vines began to creep, timid and green, as if unsure whether it was truly safe to grow again. Streams that had once run dry, choked by ash and poisoned by hatred, began to murmur beneath stones darkened by grief, their music tentative, like a forgotten lullaby cautiously recalled. And among those ruins, among those vast fallen memories of a kingdom forged in torment and extinguished in judgment, there walked the host of Valinor, not now as warriors, but as pilgrims, each step a testament not to conquest, but to endurance. They moved through the fields of ruin, not to possess, but to bear witness. Their eyes, once sharpened by the brightness of celestial battle, had softened into something older, something deeper. A gaze that understood that light, to be meaningful, must learn to dwell among shadows. Yane walked alone for many hours each day, not in command, but in contemplation. His path was neither straight nor swift, for he allowed the terrain to guide him. The shattered spires, the scorched valleys, the remnants of dungeons whose stone walls still wept the tears of those who had suffered within. He did not turn from them, nor avert his gaze when confronted by some relic of cruelty. A rusted chain, a splintered helm, the imprint of a body long turned to dust but remembered still by the shape it left in the ash. He stopped at each, and though he spoke no words, his silence was not absence, it was presence, reverence. It was on the fourth day, as the gray mist of early morning clung low to the scorched foothills like a shroud spun from sorrow and memory, that he came upon a place unlike the rest. It was a hollow, almost hidden, shielded by what remained of a blackened grove, whose trees, though burned, still stood upright, skeletal and defiant, their branches like arms raised not in surrender, but in witness. The air here was still, unnaturally so, as though it remembered the echoes too clearly and feared to speak above them. And in the heart of that hollow, where once a garden might have bloomed before it was drowned in shadow, there stood a single figure, tall, cloaked in a mantle the color of aged stone, his face half-veiled, yet unmistakable to those who had known him. It was Fanarin, son of Finwë, brother of Feanor, king of the New Lore, who had remained in Ammon, who had now come across the sea, not in pursuit of vengeance, but to see for himself the end of the tale begun so long ago in tears and flame. Yane did not speak at first, and neither did Fanarin. The silence between them stretched, but it did not strain. It was the silence of two voices preparing to speak truth, knowing that truth, when shaped carefully, must be given space to breathe. At last it was Fanarin who broke the stillness, his voice low and rich, like the sound of distant thunder heard through heavy rain. This was the place, he said, not turning his head, his eyes fixed on something far beyond the visible world. Here, they say, was one of the deep pits, not one of stone or fire, but of memory. A place where Morgoth's servants would bring the minds of the captured, unmaking them not with pain, but with fear, with isolation, with silence so deep it drowned thought itself. Yane stepped beside him, his eyes searching the earth as though listening for the ghosts beneath the soil. "And now it is empty," he said, though his voice betrayed no triumph. Now there is silence once more, but not the same silence. Varan turned slowly, and his face, though lined with the long weight of years, shone still with the dignity of the Eldar, and with the quiet sorrow of one who has lost much, yet bears the loss with grace. "It is not the same," he said, "but it echoes, and echoes have a way of shaping the chambers they haunt." He turned his gaze upward to the blackened canopy of trees that framed the pale dawning sky. "Do you think," he asked, "that they will understand? The ones who come after?" Will they hear in the winds that whisper through these ruins the stories we failed to pass down? Not the stories of war, but the stories of why it began, of how a heart that seeks beauty can twist if it believes itself more worthy than others to define what beauty means. Yonwi was still, and when he answered, it was as one reflecting not just on a question, but on the burden of bearing answers. "Some will," he said. "Not many. Few are still will remember long. But perhaps that is not what matters most. Perhaps it is enough that we remember now that we lay down these stones not as barriers, but as beacons. That when the night returns, and it will, they will see the faint gleam of these memories and know someone was here before them. Someone who saw the edge and turned back, even if only just." Benarfin smiled faintly, and the expression was like the warmth of a hearth seen through the window of a house on a winter road, soft, distant, and utterly human. "I once believed that my brother was the brightest of us," he said, "and in a way, perhaps he was. But brightness untempered becomes fire, and fire, when untended, devours even those it sought to warm. He chased the light he could never possess, and in doing so created a darkness so vast that even Morgoth made use of it." There was no bitterness in his tone, only the slow melancholy of a soul that has learned to forgive without forgetting. He knelt then, placing his hand upon the soil, and whispered words in Quina, ancient, sacred, soft as moonlight falling on a sleeping child, a blessing, or perhaps an apology. Yanwë bowed his head, and the mist moved gently around them, as if the very air listened, and in listening was healed a little. Above them a breeze stirred for the first time that day, and through the broken grove it moved with a sound like breath exhaled, not in pain, but in release. The days continued to turn, not with haste nor with indifference, but with the solemn rhythm of a great clock unseen, as though the very breath of Arda had slowed, exhaling its sorrow with long, contemplative sighs through the trembling leaves of trees not yet reborn, and across the hills where shadow once lingered in the roots like poison. And in that fragile interval between endings and beginnings, time felt thick with meaning. Every footstep laid upon the cracked stone echoed not just with sound, but with memory, as though the land itself was learning how to speak again, and each voice that passed over it lent it a syllable of a new, uncertain language. It was on such a morning veiled in thin mist that clung to the world like the lingering breath of old tears, that Eoniwi wandered beyond the hollow where he had spoken with Finarine. At last, where the Finnar flowed softly single day, his path led him eastward, where the mountains began to rise like the bones of a sleeping colossus, their peaks hidden in vapor, their slopes strewn with boulders that bore the marks of ancient battles. Scorch marks like bruises, cracks like open wounds, and the scattered remnants of iron long rusted. Forgotten relics of the fury that once scoured the land. The path here was not marked, not paved. Butane walked with purpose, his feet unerringly drawn toward something unseen, as if the land itself, though wounded, still remembered the way. He came at last to a narrow gorge, hidden between the folds of stone and shrouded in a silence so complete it seemed untouched by even the winds. The air here was still, suspended in a hush that felt sacred, as though some fragment of the world's first stillness had been kept hidden from the noise of the ages. And in the center of that gorge, nestled against the breast of the rock, was a pool, clear, unmoving, deep as thought itself. No bird sang here. No wind stirred the surface. It was a place untouched by flame, untouched even by the passing of warriors or the tracks of beasts. It was whole. And in that wholeness, it carried a weight unlike any ruin. Yonwi knelt beside the pool, and for a long time he did not speak. He simply watched the water, and the water watched him in return, mirroring the sky, the stone, and the slow movement of thought behind his eyes. And then, quietly, as though he were speaking to the heart of Arda itself, he began to speak, not with command, not with judgment, but with something gentler. "There is something about stillness," he murmured, his voice no more than the breath of wind against the grass, "that invites reflection. It does not demand it like a storm might demand shelter, or like pain demands voice. It invites. It offers its silence not as a punishment, but as a mirror. And in that mirror we see ourselves not as we appear in motion, in conflict and triumph, but as we are when all is stripped away, as we are when we are alone." He reached out, touching the water with his fingers. It did not ripple. It simply accepted. And that acceptance struck him more deeply than any word spoken since the war's end. "We speak often of the light," he continued, his gaze unfocused as though he spoke not to the water, but to something beyond it. "We venerate it. We build songs around it, stories. We use it to measure the goodness of things as though what is brightest is always best. And yet light without shadow is blindness. Light without weight is illusion. We forget sometimes that the light gains its power not only from what it reveals, but from what it chooses not to hide." It drew a breath, heavy, thoughtful, Melor Morgoth. He did not begin as darkness. He began as the most radiant of us. And perhaps that is what frightens me still. Not what he became, but how close he once was to all that we call beautiful. It is a fragile thing, the line between yearning and hunger, between vision and domination. He wanted to shape the world, yes, but who among us did not? He merely believed his voice should be louder, that his song should drown out all others. The wind stirred then, faint and tentative, and a single leaf, brown and curled, drifted from the upper ledge of the gorge into the pool. It landed softly, sending out slow ripples that moved like thoughts through a dreaming mind. Yanni watched them spread. "And now he is gone," he whispered, more to himself than to the wind. And the song he once sang, loud, defiant, broken, is silent. But I wonder, is silence truly silence when it is filled with memory? Behind him a footstep, soft and deliberate. He turned and saw a figure approach, tall, dark-haired, robed in deep gray. It was Elrian, daughter of the Eladar, who had remained in a man, a law-keeper and one of the quietest among the host, but also among the most perceptive. She carried no weapon, no crown, only a staff carved with runes of thought and wisdom, and her eyes were the color of twilight skies over quiet seas. She said nothing for a time, merely sitting beside him, letting the silence grow roots around them. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, and even yet rich with meaning. "I used to think," she said, "that the void was a place, a realm, a location from which nothing returns. But now I think the void is not a place, but a possibility. The place we fall into when we cease to listen to others. When we believe ourselves the only voice worth hearing. When silence becomes not a space for healing, but a refusal to hear. Anway turned to her, surprised not by her presence, but by how deeply her words echoed his own thoughts. "Then what," he asked, "becomes of a world that must carry the memory of one who fell into that void by choice?" She did not answer immediately. Instead, she traced the rim of the pool with a slender branch, watching the ripples unfold, then fade. "We remember," she said, "not to sanctify, not to vilify, but to understand. Memory is not the preservation of pain. It is the acknowledgement of the path. And paths, even the darkest, teach us where not to step again." Yonwi nodded slowly, and together they sat by the water, the silence between them no longer empty, but full of the weight of what had passed and the breath of what might come. And high above, the mist began to lift. And so it was that the years, slow and solemn, began once more to move forward, not with the thundering march of triumph, nor the brazen song of heroes returning from war, but with the quiet rhythm of a world that remembers. It must continue, even when it does not fully understand how. The land, though still wounded in places where memory clung like mist to the hollows of the earth, began to awaken, not all at once, but gradually, tenderly, as if testing the weight of its own breath. Where once fire had scorched and towers had shattered, now grasses pale and trembling began to rise, and the wind, no longer burdened with ash or the screams of the vanquished, whispered instead of rain and root, and the longing of life to begin again. The host of Valinor, having completed the work for which they were summoned across the sea, began to prepare their return, not with fanfare, nor with the pride of those who had conquered, but with the quiet humility of witnesses who had seen the full breadth of beauty and ruin, and who now understood that the greatest task was not to fight the darkness, but to endure its memory and not be undone by it. They moved through the remnants of the world like moonlight across the surface of a sleeping sea, graceful, contemplative, and without need for recognition. Beyond we, however, lingered. He stood alone upon the cliffs that overlooked the restless waters of the western shore, where the ships waited once more, with their white sails furled like folded wings, their hulls glinting faintly beneath the fading light. The sea below was not calm, but neither was it cruel. It moved with the slow rhythm of tides, ancient and knowing, as if it too remembered all that had come before, and had chosen not to speak of it in waves and foam, but only to carry it gently into the deeper places where memory becomes myth, and sorrow is softened by distance. He watched the horizon where sky met sea, and in that meeting point he saw not just a place, but a question, the eternal space between what has been and what has yet to come, between the known and the unknowable. It shimmered like a veil, as if the world itself were still half asleep, dreaming of what it once was before the discord of Morgoth's fall had rippled across the song of creation, like a single bitter note stretched too long across the melody. And when at last Ilmariel came to stand beside him again, her presence was not a disruption, but a continuation, like the second verse of a song not yet finished. "You have not spoken much of your final meeting with him," she said, her voice soft but strong enough to carry even in the wind. "Of the moment when he passed beyond? Was there anything in him at the last that you had not expected to see?" When Wei was silent for a long moment, his eyes tracing the distant curve of the sea, and when he spoke, it was with a voice that bore the weight of thought ripened over many days. each word slow, deliberate, touched by the kind of grief that does not weep, but settles deep in the soul like winter beneath the bark of old trees. There was a stillness, he said at last, a quiet not of surrender nor of peace, but of something else, something older than either. He did not rage, nor curse, nor cry for mercy. He merely looked at me as if he saw at last the shape of his own reflection, not as he had imagined it, but as it was, distorted by time and pride and the long shadow of his own unyielding will. He turned slightly, meeting her gaze, and in his eyes there was no anger, no bitterness, only the quiet pain of understanding. He looked, he continued, as a fallen star might look at the ocean into which it has fallen, not with regret, perhaps, but with the astonishment of realizing that it can no longer burn, that the fire it believed eternal has been swallowed by something older, deeper, more patient. I saw not the defiant Vala who defied Au, nor the cruel master of Angband. I saw a soul unanchored, a voice that had forgotten how to sing, a flame that had turned in upon itself and found only at Mariel. Said nothing for a while, and the silence between them was not awkward, but reverent, as though the air itself had chosen to listen, to cradle their words like seeds planted in the soil of a world learning to grow again. But even that, she said eventually, even that image is not the end of him. The door of night is a closing, yes, but not a forgetting. And the void does not undo. It holds, it preserves, it reflects. And perhaps in time, beyond time, when the world is remade and the music returns to its first beauty, even his voice might be woven in anew, not as it was, but as it was meant to be. Yanwei nodded, though his eyes remained distant. "If such a day comes," he murmured, "then let it come not with judgment, but with harmony. Let it come not as justice redressed, but as dissonance resolved. Let his voice return not in thunder, but in healing, in understanding." A breeze stirred the hem of his robe, carrying the scent of the sea, mingled with a distant memory of starlight and flowers, long lost beneath the waves. And in it there was no fear, only the reminder that all things pass, and all things in their own time are gathered. Behind them the ships were being readied. The sails began to rise like the wings of great birds, preparing to take flight across the unending west. And the warriors of the host moved slowly toward the shore, their faces calm, their hearts heavy, but unbroken. They would return not as saviors, not as exiles, but as witnesses, bearing no trophies, no spoils, only memory and the fragile hope that what had been broken could in time be made whole again. Onway turned at last and took one final look at the land behind the scorched mountains, the greening plains, the rivers that now remembered how to sing. And he bowed not to a king, not to a foe, but to the land itself, as one bows to a teacher who has spoken truths too deep for words. Then he stepped aboard the ship, and the sea embraced them all, not as conquerors, not as gods, but as pilgrims returning home. And far in the distance, unseen by all, the stars looked down with ancient eyes and whispered to one another in the silence beyond language. The black foe was gone, but the memory